Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A stage, which is the most honest stage in tech. I'm Ciara, and I will be your host for this session. And we are going to be joined by two of the most intelligent teenagers that I have ever met, Alex and Ciara from the Knowledge Society. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Ciara, it's good to be here.
Well, probably both of the youngest we've ever had on stage. You maybe tell the audience and myself a bit about yourself, starting with yourself, Alex, where you come from, your age, and what you're about.
Yeah, definitely. My name's Alex. I'm 16, and I'm from Toronto. And so I'm part of this high school accelerator, if you will, called the Knowledge Society. So it exposes high-performing teens to exponential technologies and some of the world's largest problems. And so as part of that program, I've been working on quantum computing. So you can imagine everything from finance to molecular simulations to AI. And now I've transitioned into AI for food production. So that's kind of the high-level rundown, if you will.
Yeah, and Ciara, who I'm struggling to not call Ciara, because our names are the same on paper. Tell me a bit about yourself, where you come from, etc., etc.
Yeah, so I'm Ciara. I'm 15 years old, and I'm from Fort Washington, Maryland, in the U.S. And so I'm also part of the program that Alex is a part of the Knowledge Society. And so my first year of that program, I was really into AI, and specifically its intersection with education. And now I'm kind of more into IoT, Internet of Things, and health tech. So I'm working on creating a non-invasive at-home monitoring device for ovarian cancer. So that's kind of what I'm working on now, but still really interested in the educational technology space.
Yeah. I don't know about the audience, but when I was 15, 14, I was definitely not changing the world. I was probably in my bedroom reading books.
Not a bad way to be spending your time, though.
Yeah. But we're going to get a little demo today, am I correct?
Yes.
Which will involve audience participation. We'll go through this, and then we'll open the field for any questions you might have for the guys, because that is the point of the stage, and ready to hear from our beautiful audience today.
Awesome. So a little bit of a background on the generative models. So I'm not sure how many of you have seen this rapid explosion of models like DALL-E, DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion, Imagen, and there are honestly a bunch of others that have come out in recent years, months.
Yeah.
But they're all based on this AI process called diffusion. And so essentially once this paper had come out, we were seeing a bunch of these models being based on that type of technology, and there are obviously different companies working on the technology. So you have the largest tech companies, Google, Meta, everything. And so what this is an open source version of that. So Dream Studio comes from Stable Diffusion, who are run by Stability AI, and it's a completely open source platform where you can essentially type in a few words, and it takes a few moments, but the AI model will return images that it thinks match your prompt. And so what I wanted to do here, as you can see at the bottom, probably on the monitor right now, is this is an example prompt. So it's a dream of a distant galaxy by Caspar David Friedrich, matte painting, trending on ArtStation HQ. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to play a little game of Mad Libs. And so we're probably going to go with an animal, the setting, so you can imagine space, or is it in a field, or is it on the ocean, and the style of the artist that you want to see. And we're going to play a little game of audience Mad Libs. So if you want to raise your hand, I'll just kind of call you out, and let's see what we can create.
So we have our volunteers, Rita and Sarah. They'll go and get answers from any of you guys.
Yeah, so the first thing is an animal.
An animal.
Yeah.
An animal.
Anyone want to suggest an animal? Someone at the front over here?
A cow.
A cow. Okay. Very good animal.
Very solid choice.
And now a setting.
And now a setting.
Yeah.
Anyone want to suggest a setting? At the front.
A forest.
Okay.
Forest.
And now an artist.
Yeah.
It can be like Monet, Picasso, whatever style you would like.
Anyone want to suggest an artist? Someone at the back over there? Art experts in the audience?
Go with Van Gogh.
Van Gogh?
Van Gogh.
Oh.
And so the process is you can choose any words,
Yeah.
any setting, you write in a sentence, and we'll see what it generates.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually
Amazing.
quite crazy. Playing around with it, you can create some very fantastical things, and you can create some realistic things. So if you wanted paintings of a very specific item, and you wanted it to be hyper-realistic, almost like a photo, you can have that, and you can use it for clip art. Or if you just want something to display on your wall, or if you want to put an NFT online, you can do that. And this is giving you the creative expression to actually do that, even if you're not an artist. I will ask one more thing. Actually, yeah, let's run with this. So I'll just click the Dream button. So I've arranged some of the settings on the side, and we click Dream. It takes a few moments, so it's about 20 right now, so it's not too long. But what it's essentially doing is it's learning what these parameters actually mean. So as you can imagine, what is a cow, what is a forest, and what is Van Gogh style. And so you can see...
Oh my goodness. I actually think some of those I would hang on my wall.
Yeah, it's quite good, right? and so you have these different options that you can generate as well, if it lets me out of here. And there's different styles of what you would exactly like. And so even if you added, for example, a black cow, so in this one we have kind of spotted brown cows. And so what if I really wanted a black cow? Well, I can click Dream again, give it some time to generate some images, and it will return me a black cow. And so you can imagine how custom tailored this can be to whatever you want it to be.
And you can get as descriptive as you like, and it will interpret any edits that you make to your own kind of suggestions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
there are some limits to what it can and can't do, just because of the way it interprets language. But you can get fairly descriptive, and it will give you a lot of good results.
That's absolutely amazing. I think also, Ciara, didn't it go viral recently? There's been lots of TikToks. I don't know if anyone in the audience has seen of very descriptive in different ways.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the cool thing about this is that like this platform, you can just literally go to dreamstudio.ai and do this yourself at home. And so it's so crazy. Like, now we're seeing so many like cool prompts being created, and so much art is created from that. So it's really awesome and accessible, honestly.
Yeah, and what's really cool about this, I think my internet cut out, but what's really cool about this is that you can actually also create videos. And so we let this video train for about
4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
So it's pretty long, but as you can see, we fed it a prompt of Darth Vader drifting through space.
Yeah, in a spaceship, yeah.
And this is written sentences saying Darth Vader floating through space, starry background.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
It's really amazing.
And so it output, essentially what it does, it compiles images back to back to back to back. And so you can imagine you're just rendering images and you kind of splice them together, and now you have a really cool video that you've now generated.
Yeah,
and
really interesting. And imagine like actually doing this by hand. It would have taken like days or at least weeks to come up with all this. It's like a minute long, and so just you can generate this in just like 4 hours. Like it's just crazy what this technology can do.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot, but relative to how long it would have taken a person to do this, it's quite interesting actually how fast it can get done, and it all depends on your hardware as well. So if you have a really good rig at home, this could probably get done in an hour or so.
Yeah.
It's really, really impressive. Do you think that this kind of technology poses a threat to those people who have jobs in creative industries, like artists?
I don't think it does actually do that. I mean, if we think of like the introduction to like more digital art, like that didn't like completely take out the industry of like, you know, paintings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It just gave more people an opportunity to like express their creative freedom. So I think with AI, like instead of just drawing stuff and going to art school and kind of just like having that barrier with like expressing your creativity through art, you can now get like there are new artists that can create descriptive prompts, and that's going to be a new way of expressing your creativity. And it's still like there's still like art itself. It's kind of the artist is the person who wants to figure out like what emotions they want to convey in the art, what kind of style they want the art to be. And so while you're not exactly hand drawing it or hand painting it, you are the one kind of engineering this art, engineering this environment. So it's just like enabling more people to express their creative freedom in much less time as well.
That's a really good way to put it, and actually a great way to think about it, I think. I personally can see myself spending a lot of time on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to play around, and just adding on to even Ciara's point, it's not that this is going to take over.
Yeah.
There's always a space for artists to work here, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is to realize that this is actually making artists' jobs a lot easier, because they're the ones putting in a prompt and they're having all this do all the hard work, right? And the better these models get and the more advanced they get, the more exact they can be in their feature application, and the better they can convey the artist's sentiments and expressions.
And there still is the element of creative input. You have your expressions visualized. And
Exactly. And it's kind of an art of feature engineering. It's exactly how you input this prompt, right? And so it's the question of like, do I write black cow? Do I write just cow? And so it's an art almost in and of itself, which is really interesting.
Well, it's absolutely stunning. I'm very impressed.
Yeah.
And of course, the point of this stage is to get the audience involved. So if anyone has any questions, we're going to open out to the floor. My lovely volunteers will come around and give anyone a mic who wants to ask the question.
Hi, I have a question, actually 2 questions. One is very short. Did you do this video in this Dream Studio as well?
Yeah, so right now Dream Studio is only for images, but the actual model it's based on, it's called Stable Diffusion. You can actually download the model and you can make a few tweaks to it, and you can actually generate videos, because all a video really is a sequence of images.
Sure. Thanks. And another one is that, is there any science behind the description? Because it's hard to force the software to do exactly what you want sometimes. And is there any science behind it?
Of course. Yeah, Ciara, if you want to.
You can go.
Okay, awesome. There's actually a prompt guide on Stable Diffusion, and it's like the basics of prompt engineering. So it's almost a science in and of its own. So you can look through here, right? So Panda is going to yield you pretty generic images, and then you can start tweaking them. So for example, if you want realistic, if you want realistic, if you want an oil painting, or if you want it in the style of some artists, you can specify that, and you can add some finishing touches, so trending on ArtStation, or if you want realistic lighting, you can add Unreal Engine. And so it's almost an art in and of itself, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, maybe just going off that question, do you think there is ways that this app can be developed to more directly translate your exact image you have, your imagination, directly? What's the future of the app?
I think, one cool application that I've been really excited for, and I really do hope that happens eventually, is combining this technology with brain-computer interfaces or something like that, to where you can actually take the idea straight from your mind. And essentially, I mean, this is our moonshot idea, but take these ideas straight from your mind, this creativity, and then translate it to this, translate all of those waves and stuff like that into tangible art pieces. And so I think that's a really big future for this as well.
Yeah.
And I actually don't think that's that much of a moonshot. I was at a hackathon not too long ago, and that was our exact idea. We had brought a brain-computer interface, and we were measuring brainwaves of how you were feeling in that moment. So if you were at a specific frequency of brainwaves, if you were really tired, it would kind of give you these darker undertone images through the model. And if you were really happy and if you were really light and you were loving life, it would kind of give you these lighter, brighter tones. And so it's really interesting to see how the model even interprets feelings and what colors it associates feelings with. And so that's an idea in and of itself. And that was actually really interesting to explore.
Yeah, translating emotions onto the canvas, which is also an integral part of creation and art and making paintings anyway, which could be lacking, one could argue. That's really amazing. Any other questions from our beautiful audience? Over here?
Thank you. What about the rights of those images if someone wants to use them commercially?
Right, and that's an entire question in and of itself. It's who does the art belong to? Is it the person who's making the art, or is it the AI itself? And this is really a question of law. And it varies everywhere, no matter where you go. And Ciara, if you want to speak to that point.
Yeah, so something that I like to think of, like, again, this is not exactly, we haven't really established this, but an analogy I like to think of is like, so if you think of like platforms like Adobe and Canva, where you basically have this canvas and you're taking images and stuff from their platform, so images like, you know, of different like stickers or different like animated people and stuff like that, and you're adding them to this canvas and you're changing the font, you're changing the color and stuff like that. Does that make it Canva's like art? Does that make it their poster, or does it make it yours? And like, and we don't really have a question about that. Like, it's our art, it's our Canva presentation or poster or whatever. So I think we're still at uncertainty with AI because it's a bit more complicated than just, you know, putting stuff on a poster. But I like to think of it as the fact like you're putting, it's like this is a specifically engineered prompt from you, and you're putting your different emotions and creativity into it, and that's the important part. Like, again, it's like art is kind of just like the emotions and stuff that you convey on the canvas. It's not necessarily all of the technical stuff with like who owns which image and stuff like that. And I think there's not a definite answer for this question right now, but that's kind of how I like to think of it, and kind of like how to relate it to like something that's already like tangible and something that people are already working with.
Yeah. Maybe, guys, we should do another audience-led example. So,
so I just kind of wanted to point out with this example.
It's a great one.
There's still a lot of work to be done in the space, right? So I typed in raccoon floating through space, hyper-realistic. And so it got 2 of the 3 features right. So it's hyper-realistic and it's a raccoon, obviously. But it didn't quite understand the floating through space part because it hasn't seen a lot of these images that it's trained on be a raccoon floating in space, right? You can imagine there's not that many images of that. And so it's still fairly limited in the complexity of the prompt, but as you can see from our examples before, there's a lot that it can do, and it's just continuously being developed. And so another Mad Libs, let's do it.
Let's do another audience-led canvas.
Even if you guys want to do a character as well,
I could do a
that would be interesting.
A character. Does anyone have a character suggestion?
Could be any character at all.
Cartoon or otherwise.
This might be a long shot, but Bob the Builder?
Bob the Builder.
That's a great character. Throwing it back.
And let's have a setting.
A setting.
Any setting.
In outer space?
In outer space.
Okay.
We'll see if it gets it this time.
And do we want a style? Do we want it to be hyper-realistic? Do you want the lighting to be good?
Yeah?
Digital art?
Digital art. Okay. Let's see what the model outputs.
It's so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, for this one, it's 1 image.
I'm very impressed.
Stepped it down.
Oh.
There we go. Not
quite interesting.
Not too bad.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if we upscale this to a few images, let's just drag it to the right. And again, this interface is really simple to use. Just hop on there, use it.
What are the maximum amount of suggestions that you can have it generate?
So it really depends on the model that you're using. So this is based on Stable Diffusion. So Stable Diffusion works quite well with abstraction images. It doesn't perform the best with hyper-realistic scenarios, and there are other models that are better with different things, right?
Okay,
so it depends.
yeah.
But you can get pretty specific. Like, I don't know how many of these images it's actually seeing, but given that it's space and digital art, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great one.
So you can see, and it's able to recognize characters as well. If I input Bob the Builder randomly and it hadn't been exposed to this before, it really wouldn't understand what to put out. But because it's seen so many examples of what this actually looks like, it's quite interesting to see how it interprets it.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Maybe we can open up the floor to kind of discuss, this is obviously an unbelievable advancement. You're having your thoughts and images that are in your mind translated onto a canvas. Obviously, there's problems that also brings up. But I would like to know what kind of dark sides can you see to AI, or are there anything that we should be wary of beyond the legality issues of regulating who owns copyright, et cetera,
I think one big thing, and we kind of have already been seeing it, it's one of the things that people are most afraid of, is like deepfakes, for example. So we've been developing that technology. Like that technology is like really advanced right now, to where you can kind of just like get a person, like a celebrity of some sort, and you can make them like type a prompt or something, and you can make them say kind of whatever you want them to say. And we're getting so advanced at that it looks so realistic, people are not telling the difference. So that's another thing. Like I think that we need to just, like, transparency is key. We need to have a lot more transparency with is this AI generated, is it not AI generated? Like, that is what's going to be the key, and that's what's going to kind of help make this whole, like, AI generated art and creative AI in general integrate into society better. It's transparency, because right now we're kind of lacking that.
And maybe, Alex, a question for you. There are, in the generation, for example, if you say a person, and they will show us, let's say, a white person, are there inherent biases within the systems that choose certain kinds of images?
Right, and this is a huge problem in AI and the way that generative models work is how do we get rid of this bias that is present within the models?
Yeah.
And so you're trying to have parameters that are clearly labeled. You're trying to have data that classifies people as just people, right?
People, exactly.
And if we do output like a person, I don't know what their skin tone would be, right? But it's most likely going to be white, just because that's what it's exposed to. And so what you really want to do is have a lot of data of people of different cultures, religions, etc., to the point where you're not restricting the model's view of what a person is. And so that's really critical when we're working with AI ethics. And even companies like OpenAI, they're entirely dedicated to creating safe AI and ethical AI. And how do we make sure that everybody is represented properly?
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting subsection of the work that's going on.
Yeah. Any other questions to hit us with from our audience? Yeah.
I know that we talk about the ownership of the images created by AI, but what about the ownership of the images which was the AI models trained of? Do you think that the artist which art was used to train this AI should be paid?
Well, I think it's hard to honestly, like, because it's trained on so much data. If you think of just like how much data it's trained on to even like recognize characters, it's kind of hard to track down the artists that they base some of their like art off of. They use just like so much different data. And to be honest, I'm not completely sure how exactly they like organized it, and how if they label it, if they like add an artist or not. Not entirely sure about that process, but I can definitely tell you it would be difficult to kind of track down the artist. Even think of like the animation example that we had. So many images. That was a 1 minute long video, but like you saw so many different images like combined together and stuff like that. It's really hard to track down that artist, but it's a great question that we need to be thinking of and need to be talking more about in the space.
Yeah, and in the examples that we've already done, a lot of artists are before our generation. And so if you think of Picasso, Van Gogh, and even going back further to like Da Vinci even, how do you really get their permission to use their images in this art model? And that's an entire ethical question, because if you're using this to generate images of people, well, people like Steve Jobs, he was recent enough to the point where people would believe a deepfake of him talking. And so it's this entire ethical question of what are we supposed to do? Who do we have permission to act on, and who do we not have permission to act on? And this is, again, OpenAI's entire mission is to understand that. And with OpenAI, a lot of the images that they actually use, they go out and make sure that it's okay to use them. Yeah.
So with the program, for example, if you put in Ciara Haley, myself, would it draw an image of me without my consent, or how would the consent issue like work there?
Well, I mean, let's try it. I'm not sure how much content you have in the public domain, but
actually, I think we should not try.
Ciara, and last.
Now I'm extremely nervous. I think abort that mission, maybe.
Well, let's try Ciara. We have Ciara and Ciara spelled the same, so.
Just in case.
Just in case.
I don't know what's out there. The internet is dangerous, guys.
There you go, right?
There you go.
And so this is, again, the question of the kind of people it's just a name.
Yeah.
Ciara who? I don't know. This looks like the same person, but again, it's the question of like, if I put in a different name, right?
Also brings up images of human famous or non-famous people.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if I put in Alex, for example,
very interesting.
Quite interesting, as you can see.
Very
it's like different interpretations.
Yeah. So, I definitely think save the full-on expose Google on myself.
Definitely.
Any more questions from the crowd before we wrap up? We have 2 minutes, just under 3 minutes left. Take any last questions?
Well, I think regardless, the future implications of the technology are limitless. I was listening to a podcast that was Joe Rogan interviewing Steve Jobs, and the Joe Rogan voice was so scarily accurate, I thought it was him, just because the amount of data he has on Spotify that you can train your model on. And so it's not limited to visual art. You can have these long-form podcast-type art pieces that you can generate. And oftentimes, it's hard to tell what's real and what's not. And so that's another interesting perspective. And in fact, if you search on Spotify right now, Joe Rogan, Steve Jobs, it's actually quite an interesting conversation that they have just based off this AI learning about the topics that they talk about and their mannerisms of speaking and actually creating a rather insightful conversation, which is really interesting.
Maybe just finally, as the last kind of thing to go through, you guys are both from the Knowledge Society. Maybe tell me a little bit about, and the audience, about what is the Knowledge Society and how two extremely intelligent teenagers are on the stage at WebSummit.
Yeah, so the Knowledge Society, like Alex said, they take high-performing, ambitious teenagers, and they run this kind of youth accelerator program. So it's a year-long program. They have the Innovate and Activate. So last year, Alex and I were in Innovate, and so there's a bunch of different aspects to it. So in one aspect, at sessions every single week, you're learning about either emerging technologies, skill sets like networking and like building pitch decks and stuff like that, and also mindsets like bias towards action, done is better than perfect, boss mentality, all of those things, right? But you also have, like Alex and I, we both like did a focus in an emerging technology that we did about like in the beginning-ish of the year, that we started in the beginning of the year. I did artificial intelligence, Alex, you did quantum computing, and so we get a chance to kind of dive deep into that technology, specialize in it, do projects, create articles, create content, teach others about it. And that's kind of like the specialist part of it. And then the generalist part, where, again, like learning about all these different technologies, we actually get to do challenges and hackathons. Like, for example, last year there was challenges with X Prize, United Nations, Walmart, IKEA. And so basically it's exposure and community that are the main things that make TKS kind of help produce people like Alex and I and other people here from TKS that are doing these crazy things. So honestly, it's that's the really incredible part, and yeah, really awesome.
Well, I am extremely grateful that you both came onto the stage and joined this incredible session. I think you're both going to massively far away places in your lives, and please come back to WebSummit every year from now on.
Of course.
We'd love to have you.
With love.
So round of applause for our perfect guests.